IELTS speaking is an area of the IELTS exam where they will judge your way of speaking personally and professionally and give you a corresponding score. If you don't impress the examiner, unfortunately, you won't get a good score. You can, in some way, actually manipulate the examiner into thinking you are actually a great English speaker. It's really simple. However, there are certain rules and some tips you should try to follow the best that you can. So let's have a look at them in brief, and later on you can have a look at them in the in-depth sections. The speaking component assesses your use of spoken English and usually takes between 10 to 15 minutes to complete. Every test is recorded. The speaking component is delivered in such a way that it does not allow candidates to rehearse set responses beforehand. The first part, the examiner will ask you general questions about yourself and a range of familiar topics, such as home, family, work, and studies, as well as your personal interests. This part lasts between 4 and 5 minutes. The second part, you will be given a card, which asks you to talk about a particular topic. You will have 1 minute to prepare before speaking for up to 2 minutes. The examiner will then ask 1 or 2 questions on the same topic to finish this part of the test. And the last part, which is part 3, you'll be asked further questions connected to the topic in part 2. These questions will give you the opportunity to discuss more abstract ideas and issues. The part of the test lasts between 4 and 5 minutes. First, let's look at how the IELTS speaking is scored. IELTS speaking is scored according to a strict grading criteria, and if you want to impress the examiner, you will need to know what the examiner actually wants. In brief, pronunciation, fluency and coherence, grammar and vocabulary all count for 25%. Following on from the previous advice, you need to practice before the exam to make sure that the appropriate skills are automatic. The very best practice is to listen and then speak. Language learning is about repetition. You also need to understand what you will be asked about on the day. You'll be asked to talk about everyday topics and ideas that are actually familiar to you. As the test goes on through the questions, they do actually become a little bit harder. One simple suggestion is to just look at the types of questions you will get online. You may be surprised at how easy the questions are. IELTS speaking is not actually an academic test at all. It's just a test for your speaking. It's not to tell how smart you are or what you know. Sometimes people can go wrong because they treat it like an intelligence test and forget to use good English. Another tip for you is use natural spoken English. The best form of English to use in the test is actually natural spoken. This will help you speak more fluently and improve your pronunciation. Here are some examples of what works. Short forms like it's and not it is. Common spoken phrases like I guess and I suppose. The best way to learn this type of language is often to listen to native speakers. However, if you can't listen to a native speaker, you could even do this by watching some great TV shows that are available for you. Another great tip for you is to extend your answer. If there's one key piece of advice, it's to extend your answer appropriately. For example, this is inappropriate. How many languages do you speak? And the answer being 2. Japanese and English. The better version would actually be to say, I speak 2 languages. My first language is Japanese and I speak English too. I've been learning English since I was 10 and I started learning it when I was in primary school. Be aware, however, that's actually a really long answer, so sometimes it's not a good idea if you don't hope the fluency. You can lose your train of thought and get distracted and even have more room for errors. Sometimes give short answers as well. Now, not every IELTS speaking question is equal. If you get a question that you don't know very much about, do not try and talk about it. If you do, you'll probably become incoherent. It is actually much better to just give a shortest answer rather than saying a really long answer. Even if you answer a short answer, it's okay because there will always be more questions. So if you're not familiar with one topic, you can actually just answer them quite short. The examiner will ask you another question and you won't get marked down for this. Speaking immediately is the best way to answer a question. Often when people reply to an English question, they give themselves about a 3-second delay before they can reply. If you can reply after 3 seconds, that's actually a bad thing. So try and aim for having a 3-second delay and then speak. If you can do it quicker, it's even better. What you can do is start by repeating, reformulating, or commenting on the question. If the question is, what did I enjoy as a child? You can reply with, let me see. That's not something I've thought about before. It's an interesting question. That kind of gives you time to think about what you really want to say. Another tip is correcting yourself. If you can do it immediately, that's the best option. This will show the examiner that you have control over the language. If, however, you are unsure how to correct yourself, move on. The examiner may not have even noticed the mistake in the first place, and if you try unsuccessfully to correct it, a small mistake may become a much bigger one. If you don't understand the question, ask. This is a speaking test, not a listening test. If you don't understand the question, ask the examiner to repeat it or actually explain it. You should not be penalised for this, and if you answer something you're not too sure about and with a wrong answer, that's going to be worse. Learn to use a range of functional vocabulary such as opinion language. One thing that you will do a lot in this test is give your own opinion and talk about what you like and dislike. The examiner will be listening to see whether you can say, I think, I like, I feel in different ways. Discover the best way to use your preparation time in part 2. The one scary part of the test is likely to be part 2, where you need to speak for up to 2 minutes. This is a slightly unusual task and you want to use your preparation time well to help you speak enough. There are a variety of different ways you can use this time, and the best advice to find is probably one that suits you. The next tip that I can actually give you is to listen to the grammar. It's the best advice for the IELTS speaking, and it's very simple. You need to listen to the question and simply answer it. The reason for this is the one time you are face-to-face with an examiner, and sometimes you have a lot of nerves, and this is a significant problem. If you're trying to remember complex advice, you're likely to become more nervous and not perform to your best. Keep it simple. One example here is part 1. If you have a question in the past tense, such as, what sports did you play as a child? A good answer will actually use past tense. The examiner will be listening for this. Another tip that I can give you is all about body language, making sure that you make eye contact and positive gestures. A large part of communication in English is actually nonverbal. It has to do with your own personal body language. You should try to impress the examiner with your personal skills as well. You are marked by the examiner in the room, and you should do everything you can to show that person that you are a good communicator. Try to make eye contact, act bubbly and happy. Another tip that I have for you is to speak English right before the exam. It sounds pretty simple, and it actually works really well. Right before the exam, you should try to rehearse a couple of lines or conversations in English. Take a step out of the exam room and don't be afraid to look a little bit silly in the hallway repeating your lines. The problem for many people is not speaking English, rather it is moving from their own language into English. And that's all that I have for the speaking advice for the IELTS exam. Good luck!